Welcome back to Sekulow. It's been a great show today, packed show today, and we continues on. So we just had Senator Marco Rubio. Now we've got former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs at the ACLJ. And Secretary Pompeo, this was something very troubling to me because we saw the UN High Commission for Human Rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and we do a lot of work at the Human Rights Council. It's not the greatest place to always be. The U.S. is, I know the Trump administration pulled out.
Which made sense.
Which makes sense, but she was there. And she starts parroting the CCP talking points about the treatment of the Uyghurs. She actually said that the Chinese Communist Party's policies in that region of China to combat, quote, violent acts of extremism and terrorism, and called the concentration camps. The U.S. has identified this as genocide as, quote, vocational and educational training centers. At this point, I mean, should the UN be saying, and I think more countries, and the U.S. could be more vocal too, should she resign?
Jordan, this is infuriating and it is immoral. Yeah, I think she's lost all credibility. Even the traditionally progressive human rights groups are now calling for her resignation. There's Michelle Bachelet. We had trouble with her too. She didn't want to talk about what was taking place in Venezuela and Cuba either. She has been soft. She's been of the left. I had no idea that she was such in the pocket of the Chinese Communist Party. She went and took this trip. There hadn't been an inspector in there for years. She took this trip. She was guarded. She saw what they wanted to show them, and then she walked out and literally uses the Chinese Communist Party's talking points to talk about what is truly some of the worst human rights violations in this century. They are taking 1 million people, Muslim people, putting them in what look for all the world to be concentration camps, separating from their families, conducting forced sterilizations. And she walks out and says, it's all good. You can't have this. I hope Secretary General Guterres will fire her if she doesn't resign herself. This is a stain on Secretary Guterres as well. He needs to understand that what the Chinese Communist Party is doing in Western China, it will be a stain on his time if they refuse to call it what it is, which is genocide against these people.
Mike, the High Commissioner also praised the Chinese government's, and I'm quoting here, achievements in poverty alleviation and health care in other parts of their country. Now, what reality are they in here? Because this is absurd.
Jay, it's absolutely absurd. Look, there's long been a strain in American politics as well that says, well, we brought 500 or 600 million Chinese people out of poverty. Fair enough. That's likely true. The freedoms that were destroyed, the way in which this was achieved, frankly, on the backs of American workers as well, is not something we should laud, but rather it's something that we have to be deeply concerned about. For her to walk out and laud the Chinese Communist Party with what they're doing with these lockdowns, the way they treated our athletes when they came to the Olympics, the surveillance state that is being conducted against these people, the denial of basic property rights and human rights. There's zero religious freedom. Jay, Jordan, you all know this list is really long.
Yeah.
And to have this senior person, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, come out and say the Chinese Communist Party is essentially a model for what society should look like. Frankly, it tells you how far the UN has fallen and how much damage the UN is now doing to its own credibility as an institution that actually delivers for people around the world. We always knew it was problematic.
Yep.
This is about as bad as I've seen.
We still have a client, and it came right at the end of your administration, and you were helping us on this. We still have a client in prison in China for Christian work. And there were negotiations going on when you all were in power, and then, of course, that is totally stopped now. But Jordan, this is a real situation. And then to have the UN High Commissioner for human rights of all people say this, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got Secretary Blinken, the current Secretary of State, framed the visit as we're concerned the condition Beijing authorities imposed on the visit did not enable a complete and independent assessment. Surprise, surprise. Anyways, there. But as you said, Secretary Pompeo, even if they didn't say, even if they did impose those kind of views, that's what the Human Rights Commissioner should have focused on, is that, honestly, I couldn't even see what I came here to see. They prevented me from going to the places that we've been concerned about. But instead, she's on their talking points. I mean, to me, I think what you said is very important. It goes to that bigger picture of the UN. Take it out of just the Human Rights Commission and go to the entire UN. And we've seen this with the World Health Organization. Are we seeing a repeat inside the UN that just everybody is afraid of upsetting China? They have no problem condemning us. They have no problem condemning our allies.
It's precisely, you nailed it, Jordan. It's precisely the same phenomenon. They don't want to criticize the Chinese Communist Party. They are underwriting it. They know if they do, they'll get even less cooperation from China, and they frankly have become dependent on them, whether it's the World Health Organization or in this case the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. I mean, your listeners should know there is extensive satellite imagery of what's taking place there. The reason both I originally and Secretary Blinken confirmed there was genocide wasn't because we didn't like China. It was because the treatment of these people is horrific. It is genocidal. No one disputes the data. And for her to go there and walk away and basically make the argument that my Chinese counterpart would make with me, Wang Zhishe, would say, Mr. Secretary, this is about stopping terrorism. These were terrorists. These are Muslim terrorists. That is just a flat-out lie. She mouthed those words, and that is unacceptable for anybody who cares about human rights. She's got to go. I hope Secretary General Guterres will let her go, and that she will finally put someone in place that will demand that the Chinese Communist Party treat its people with the dignity they deserve because they were made in the image of God.
Final question today is on Ukraine. The president published an essay in the New York Times saying what he will do and what he won't do in Ukraine, telegraphing the strategy from the president to the Russians, to me, would hurt the United States, not help us.
You know, I kind of like some of the stuff he said he would do, so sign me up for that. It's 4 months too late, maybe 8 months too late, but some of it's good. That will be helpful so the Ukrainians can defend themselves. But to spend so much time dwelling, sending a clear message, right? We think about drawing red lines saying these are things you won't do. He drew a red line around ourselves. Right. These are things we won't do. That violates, you know, when I was a kid at West Point, goodness, too long ago, 40 years ago now, this was military strategy 101. Do not tell the enemy what you won't do.
Exactly.
Certainly in public. And they've done that. It puts America at risk. It destroys the capacity to deter Vladimir Putin. And I'm afraid this will get more Ukrainian innocents killed and will drag this out for longer than it needed to go on.
All right, folks, as always, it is great to have former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as part of our ACLJ team. I want to thank you, Secretary.